Penny's going to help us get situated here. So thank you for having us tonight. I know this has been quite a journey as we've come through the comprehensive plan, and now we're finally to the zoning that will implement so much of what we talked about during the comp plan. And this is, I think I had warned you last year that last year was the year of housing and that this year was going to continue that trend. So this first 6 months of this year has really been a lot about housing. Then we'll be moving on to some other topics to stretch your brain in other ways as we move forward. So some of the background that we look at here, just to very briefly go through to remind everybody of where we started and some of the things we're responding to. These proposed code amendments and map changes respond to a couple of different things. We've heard a lot about House Bill 1110 that was passed in 2023 and Senate Bill 2321. Those are the ones that do require regulations allowing for middle housing. We also have House Bill 1337 that passed in 2023, and that's really about ADUs. It requires that every city provide the ability to have 2 accessory dwelling units on every lot. We are also responding to not just those 2. Those are 2 guidances that we have, but we're also responding to the approved comprehensive plan and that goal that we had to create the possibility for 7,500 new housing units by 2044. So we know that this doesn't mean that's going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but over time, we need to show and have that availability so that we can provide those options. Next slide. So the purpose of these amendments, as I was mentioning, it's alignment with the comprehensive plan, complying with the state laws, increasing housing options and affordability, and introducing neighborhood commercial. The neighborhood commercial was not part of responding to any of the House bills, but that was something that we are, again, that consistency with comprehensive plan that was envisioned there and discussed and had been an interest of the council. So we have moved that through. One of the other things to remember is that currently we are actually out of alignment with our comprehensive plan because we have zoning in place in these single-family zoning districts that don't exist anymore in our comprehensive plan. So this is helping us get back into alignment as we move through these amendments. One of the other things that's really important about this is the third bullet about housing options and affordability. So one of the things that happens here is that people have options for different types of housing for different stages in their lives. Maybe you're a first-time homeowner and you really think, you know what, with a small lot, I can do this. I can get my single family home because I have a smaller lot and a smaller home. Or maybe you're aging in place and you think, I really want, one story. I don't want a big yard. I really like the idea of that cottage housing type development. There's so many different ways this can be used, including the accessory dwelling units. It really provides those options for the community so that as they move through stages in their lives, there's more places and Burien becomes a welcoming community. One of the questions that we were asked about quite a bit is, what would it mean to comply solely with House Bill 1110 versus some of the proposal from the Planning Commission? One of the things House Bill 1110 actually does, it does not address minimum lot sizes. So the Planning Commission recommended version does address minimum lot sizes anywhere between 3,500 and 6,000 square feet. And that's where we start to get the ability to allow these different types of opportunities for people, maybe as they're first entering the housing market. The allowed units outright through House Bill 1110 would be 2. In R1, the city is proposing with the Planning Commission 3, and R2 and R3, 4. When we say this is allowed use outright, the city currently allows 3 units on every lot in the residential zoning districts. You are allowed to have 1 single-family residence and 2 accessory dwelling units. 1 can be attached and 1 detached, but 3 units. So this really isn't a change, even though it sounds a little bit scary. Then in certain locations, there are opportunities to bonus up as you were. One opportunity to add an extra unit would be a preservation unit. So in that example, if you had a large lot and you had your family home and you wanted to add on to that, you could add one extra unit beyond that outright allowed. Another way that you can potentially add units is if you're in proximity to transit, in which case you could add a transit bonus or potentially affordability. Affordability, we don't anticipate we'll see a whole lot of, simply because it does require that you put that unit into an affordable designation for 50 years. So it's a big commitment, and this is probably going to be more likely seen through maybe affordable housing developers. So there are some other conditions, most of which are really consistent with House Bill 1110 and really don't change from what is allowed. We have 35 feet in height. We have the setbacks, which are pretty consistent. Planning Commission did recommend a 15-foot setback for R2 and R3 versus 20 for R1, and also the parking. So they're recommending one parking space per unit. And then the one thing where we differ from the state really significantly is the proposed code does require open space, and the state does not address that at all. So we require 200 square feet for 2 bedrooms or more. So every project you'll see that, and that's part of what we think helps make a livable city. Jenny?
Yes, great. Thank you. Hi, good evening, council. So the comprehensive plan adopted last year laid the foundation for these code amendments. There are chapters on housing and land use and utilities, and they really take the overall planning of the city into consideration. There are explicit goals, policies, and implementing actions that address this topic that we're talking about now, housing, and diversifying our housing stock. You'll see in our housing chapter and in the packet, the staff report, that there's explicit mention of increasing moderate density in low density neighborhoods, moderate density housing, to increase or diversify the housing stock, increase or expand homeownership opportunities, and encourage middle housing. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring a larger or wider spectrum of housing options that can meet households at different sizes and different income bands through these code amendments. Additionally, there is, sorry, whoa. The land use chapter. So the land use chapter establishes where and how the city is going to grow over the next 20 years. A real hallmark of that chapter is the comprehensive plan land use map. That's on the screen here. It has less colors than our zoning map because it is a higher level, a bigger picture of where we want to see industrial, where we want to see mixed use, where is our urban center, and where is our single family neighborhoods, or which were once referred to as our single family neighborhoods, after this, middle housing neighborhoods. So it also identifies like where the appropriate land uses are for future growth, as well as identifying the implementing zones. So that's where Liz was mentioning earlier, our implementing zones in the comp plan don't say RS 7200 or RS 12,000, which currently exist. They say R1, 2, and 3. That's one of those alignments we want to achieve, is by getting those new zones on our zoning map and in our Burien Municipal Code. One key takeaway from this slide is the implementing zones per land use designation. So on this map, there's yellow and orange. Those are really the areas we're focusing on. Those are land use designations, residential low 1 and residential low 2. There are 2 choices. We have discretion on where we apply R1 or R2. Those are the implementing zones for that designation. Whereas there's only one implementing zone for residential low 2, and that's R3. So as we look at the proposed zoning map, the darker orange color is corresponding directly with the land use designation. There's no other zone we can apply there except for R3. However, R1 and 2, there is discretion on where we choose to apply it or where it is, adopted. So that's the comprehensive plan land use map. This ordinance 868 does not amend the comprehensive plan, doesn't touch it, it implements it. It changes our official zoning map of the city, or proposes to change the official zoning map of the city and the Burien Municipal Code by applying the correct or appropriate implementing zones across the city, and by addressing those new zones in the Burien Municipal Code, as well as the neighborhood commercial, as well as other associated code amendments to address legally non-conforming uses like single-family homes. We're going to dive in and look closer at some of the areas of the proposed zoning map. So that last zoning map is showing, sorry, I'm going to hop back. This is just showing the areas that are changing. Yellow, or cream, yellow, and orange are those areas that are changing. The next map is going to show the proposed official zoning map of the city, which reflects other colors like pink and gray. Those were already adopted or already exist. We're not changing those. But in context of the rest of the city is this proposed zoning map. R1, there are 1,200. Actually, the next slide will have more accurate total number of lots, but a majority of the zones are being proposed R2, with R3 following and R1 being last. But I'm going to zoom in on some neighborhoods. We had a neighborhood meeting with the Hillcrest neighborhood here. This snap screenshot shows both cream and yellow, so that's R1 and R2. There was discretion on deciding where these zones were applied, and it was a kind of a balancing act. Not everything fell into a neat category, like there are no critical areas and you're close to transit. Perfect. That sounds like this zone. It may have a series of kind of competing interests or conflicting site conditions. So some neighborhoods in this screenshot, for example, are not currently connected to sewer. That doesn't mean they can't or won't be, but there are additional limitations that that we'll get into further detail. Another neighborhood, here's 3 Tree Point. So the orange and the pink on this, on the lots here, can't change. Those are corresponding with their specific land use designations. The yellow and the cream can. So there's a neighborhood on the east side, sorry, that is proposed R2, but a majority of the lots at 3 Tree Point are R1. Another corner or another highlight here is Lake Murion. On the north side is R3, which is implementing the RL2, Residential Land Use 2 land use designation, and to the south, R2. And lastly, this is the Hurstwood neighborhood. We got some feedback. This was actually a conversation with Planning Commission. We went back and forth if whether it decided or would best be zoned R1 or R2. And we ended up landing with R2 because of the pretty large lot sizes. Yeah. So there's just some highlights. Well, one thing I just want to emphasize here is like, again, that we have the discretion to change where R1 and R2 are. Just the R3 is, that kind of change requires a comp plan amendment and cannot be achieved with this ordinance. So development potential. So as you saw on those maps, the zones apply across the city. There's orange, yellow, and cream on all corners across the city. And any changes you make to one zone, R1 or 2 or 3, may impact other areas of the city or other neighborhoods. As Liz covered earlier, there are a difference in the number of allowed units outright. For R1, it's 3, R2 is 4, and R3 is 4. The development potential increases when you're within a quarter mile of a qualifying transit stop. So that's in R1, 1 bonus unit, that's complying with 1110. R2 is another bonus unit, and then R3 is 2 bonus units. These, when in close proximity to transit, only apply to the area within the smaller buffer. That's the map here shows the purple dots are qualifying transit stops, and the smaller circle is a quarter mile with a dark blue kind of dash, and then a light blue dash farther out of that. That's the half mile. But really, the areas of the city where you can have that bonus transit unit is only within that first quarter mile buffer. Unless you want to record a restrictive covenant on your property to go on the title of your property that the units will be income restricted for 50 years. Again, it's a kind of a big deal. And I believe that was incorporated or included in House Bill 1110 to directly benefit the affordable housing developers that are familiar and with those types of covenants. But yeah, so that's for the most part, in the transit corridor, there's very few lots that are zoned R3, or I'm sorry, R1. Just 3% of the R1's zoned lots are eligible for that transit bonus. Unless they want to apply for or record a restrictive covenant, they're going to have a max of 3 units. Okay, in R2, 32 of the lots are within a half-mile of that qualifying transit stop, which means they don't need to record a restrictive covenant and they can have 1 additional unit. So that's like 5. And then in R3, over half, 55% of the lots that are zoned R3 are within half a mile or quarter mile of a public transit stop, meaning they don't need to record a restrictive covenant to get up to 6 units. But that's really close to our mixed-use corridors. This is really kind of following our Ambom and First Avenue and areas in Boulevard Park as well. So there's another development potential that's added, and this is not in response to any of House Bill 1110. This is more in response to recognizing the value that naturally occurring affordable housing has and seeing the value in our existing housing stock. There are fears of gentrification or displacement that occurs. Oh, here's a great big lot and ripe for redevelopment and potential. And we recognize that existing built housing and preserving existing built housing is a lot easier, cheaper, and faster than building affordable housing. So a bonus unit that bumping R2 and R3, the areas in R1 are not eligible for this preservation unit, are great for large lots with an existing house that satisfies the requirements. It's really not conducive to small lots because it's going to be taking up a lot of space. And so really, we anticipate only this additional bonus being utilized on existing large lots where a middle housing would be viable in more attached structures, not this small detached options like with the minimum lot size of 3,500 square feet.
Thank you, Janie. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the permit review process. I think that's been of interest for a lot of the community and council members. And when do you look at these things and what applies, so on. So there's a potential, if you have critical areas on your site, you are going to have to go through an additional permit process. And I use the word potential. It's actually not a potential. It's a requirement. So you then have to do a land use permit review, generally a critical areas review. And the reason for that is the city recognizes that that's the first hurdle. That's the first bar you have to get past, is making sure that you are not creating environmental impacts with your development. So during that review process, you have the planners looking at it. They're working with your environmental consultants, your specialists, to determine what is the appropriate level of development that can happen on that site and in what location. So we have, as an example, you might have a stream and then a buffer from the stream. So you may be able to do some development in that buffer, but it's going to be minimal and it's going to be impacted. Your development potential on the site is going to be truly impacted. So once we've determined what can I build without impacting the environmental aspects of this site, we then move to a building permit. So building permit is where all of those other things that we've been talking about get addressed. So that's where we look at the fire. So our fire department looks at these and says, okay, is this a safe construction? Do they have sprinklers if they need them? How are they going to maintain that? Our building department reviewers look at it. They look at it for life safety issues. Do you have proper egress? Is it constructible? Is it going to stay up once you construct it? Because that's generally pretty important to them. And then the planners are also going to do a zoning analysis at that time to make sure that you're still meeting all of the zoning designations, such as the height, 35-foot height limit, you're meeting that, that you're actually meeting the density requirements that are allowed on the site. All of that goes into play. So it's an iterative process and it's long. It's, and I hate to say that because we certainly don't want to take a long time in our permit review process, but there's a lot of really important work that goes on. Once we issue a building permit, we then go to inspections. So we have inspectors on site, we have planners on site. They are looking to make sure that these buildings are constructed consistent with the approved plans. And that's really important. And if it isn't, people have to change things. And those are called correction notices, and they're not always well appreciated, but we think they're really important because we want to maintain safety for the community and also maintain the standards that the council has put forward in their zoning code. Lastly, after we do all of that, we then get to sign off the permit and somebody gets to move in or, start their business or whatever it is. And so that's that's the fun part. You get to that point. So we've talked a lot about the critical areas and so on. One of the things I do want to just show you, this is just a very high level conversation. But in this area, we are looking at what is this green area is a great big wetland. So you can see the wetland and then you can also see the buffers, the lighter green around the edge. You can't build in any of those areas. And so if you had one of those lots, you can see that sometimes they're very affected, but that lot that's affected by those wetland impacts, there may be a lot next door that doesn't have the same effect. And so in zoning, we look at a larger swath, not an individual lot, when we start to think about what zoning we can apply to a lot. Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to mention, had a lot of conversation about impervious surface and some of the other items. We have, as well during our housing review, we have our Public Works Department looking at this. They're making sure that all wastewater is treated on site. It's not going out off the site. They are not allowed to, permit that to happen. So there's wastewater. We're also looking at the sewer, so on. Nothing's going to be built unless there is capacity or the builder creates capacity. So if the sewer line does not extend to your property, you may or may not be able to build more until there is the sewer line. Now, sometimes people are on septic. That's going to limit your development potential. Just because the zoning code says you can have 7 units, 6 units, 4 units, 3 units, there are other constricting factors that will impact what you can build. And again, you cannot make your development somebody else's problem. So you have to create that review on the site. So you need to create your own, make your own solutions to those problems. One of the other things I just briefly wanted to mention are some of the different types of critical areas that we see. So we have wetlands that I've mentioned. We have aquifer recharge areas. We have floodplains. We have streams. We have seismic hazard areas. So there's a lot of things that we're looking at when we do this. And lastly, one of the other things that we've heard mentioned a lot about is the tree code. The tree code still applies, just like critical areas codes apply, just like the shoreline master program will apply. And in that circumstance, when we're looking at multiple things, there are compromises that have to be made. Again, you may not be able to get those 4 units. Maybe you can only get 3 because you've got these other things. But the tree code in Burien is actually very strong, and it's one of the strongest in this region. You guys were really leaders, because I know, I came from Bellevue previous to this, and that code was not as advanced. They have now caught up, but that's something that we continue to maintain and will be reviewed consistently. I have some just basic information. I'll kind of go through this quickly. But really, it's like, what can you do on a 7,200 square foot lot, which is one of our more common sizes in the city? There are a lot of different ways to develop. So on the right, you'll see what we call a stacked flat. So that could potentially be on the 7,200 square foot lot with 3 parking spaces, open space, and 3 units for families. And they're decent size. They're 2,000 square feet. So that's
Mhm.
enough for a couple, a family, potentially. But that kind of potential exists with these proposed zoning code changes. The picture on the left is what we generally see. We see one home and we see uh, probably 3 parking stalls in front of the one home, but that's more commonly what we've had. So this is the departure that would, the change that would be allowed through some of these proposed zoning code amendments. Now, please remember also, the height limit doesn't change. So the same height that you're allowed to build to today is maintained. Whether you're a stacked flat or a duplex or a cottage housing, you can't go above that 35-foot height limit. One other example, just to kind of very briefly go through this, a 3,500 square foot lot. That's probably only going to support one home. And it's not going to be a huge one, but 1,600 square foot is not, that's credible. A lot of people can live that way. Um, but it provides those opportunities for different types of housing. And it provides ownership opportunities for people where they want to start out owning a home, but the smaller lot makes it more affordable. So one of the things that we've been saying is that you really can't have the maximum number of units on a minimum lot size. The math just doesn't work. So then the question is, why does the math not work? So the math doesn't work because of a lot of things. One are the setbacks. So you'll see both of these graphics on the left-hand side of the screen right now show that you have required setbacks, front yard setbacks, interior yard setbacks, and those setbacks are actually more impactful to a small lot than a larger lot because they take up a larger percentage of those. So those small lots, it just equals less development potential. We also require parking. So you can see once we start to add in the parking for different units, you start to eat away at the lot again. Recreation space requirements. We require that 200 square feet per unit across the city. And so as those add up, you can see you get less and less development potential. So when you think about the larger numbers of units, it's for larger lots. That's where it will work. So if you have a 15,000 square foot lot, sure, you can probably pretty easily get, 5 homes on there. On a 3,500 square foot lot, you can't. But there's no requirement at all in anything in this proposed code that requires you to change your lot size or requires you to develop more. It is a choice that this code amendment would provide for people. It is not a requirement. The other thing that fits in here are the minimum tree retention and credits. So needing to maintain that tree coverage actually takes away space again from these smaller lots for development. The height I discussed earlier, 35 feet, you are limited to that. You cannot go above that. And that is the current limitation as well. We also have maximum impervious surface coverage. So some of the times you'll see some creative things. You may see a pervious driveway. There are different ways to approach this, but you can't go over. You just aren't allowed to. We won't approve it when we go through that review process. So some of the smaller minimum lot size considerations are that the minimum lot size actually increases the total number of lots available for housing. If people do choose to subdivide, that creates more potential. They are more affordable. And so people again can get in at the ground level more easily. Smaller lots reduce the size of each potential unit. So again, you won't see really, really large projects on those small lots. The infrastructure cost per lot is proportionate. So that's where it gets kind of interesting. But when you have multiple lots and you're splitting the infrastructure cost of maybe building a sidewalk or bringing in sewer, it becomes more possible for each lot to be able to afford those costs. The dimensional standards, they're proportionally higher in smaller lots, as we discussed. And again, not all property is going to choose to subdivide. So one of the other things this does, it does expand those opportunities for more housing. One other thing that I think about a lot as well is taxes. So, we all know that we pay our taxes. Each individual space here, each individual lot is going to be paying some taxes. It may be a little less than the parent lot, as it were, but maybe you have four of them. So it starts to spread that cost burden across more people, which is also a benefit to the city and to the residents. Jane?
I just want to walk through one of the housing types that's kind of different than the others, cottage housing. Whereas like the other middle housing types, duplex, triplex, fourplex, fiveplex, townhomes, stacked flats, courtyard apartments, those can all be kind of mixed and matched on a site. Cottage house or courtyard might be kind of difficult, but cottage housing is really one of its own. It's not really meant to be mixed with other housing types. These are cottage housings. They're all going to be size limited. And there's it coming out of the statute, there's a requirement that 20% of the lot needs to be reserved for open space. And something that we've included, and that open space, sorry, I'll finish this thought first, can be the common recreation space, if there are critical areas or critical area buffers on the site, a community building, private open space, all those kind of components on a site can go towards to satisfying that statutory requirement of 20% of the lot, that 20% of the lot. However, something that we introduced in our code is including a recreation space requirement. So we want to be flexible with this housing type and allow different abilities to satisfy that. And you'll see here these patios, porches, balconies, and rooftop decks are forms for which private open space or recreation space can be satisfied. This is not to scale by any means, but just kind of reflects another housing type or potential housing type that this code amendments would allow for. Jumping from housing to neighborhood commercial, this is actually, we spent, I'd say, a sizable amount of time with planning commission talking about this, there was a lot of discussion around what kind of housing types we should. We also took this to the BEDP and said, okay, what do you think? And to echo something we heard in public comment, if you do a half step, you're just going to find people who want to wait till you get to the full step. In terms of implementing some of these changes. And that's what we heard from the BEDP. Like, if you don't go far enough, it's not going to make an impact. It's not going to change things. So like, don't fear. So we were, okay, fine, we'll include, we created a new definition for corner stores. We stuck with allowing eating and drinking establishments, so restaurants and bistros, to be included in office space for meeting these allowed neighborhood commercial uses. There's going to be a set of provisions that kind of restrict the size so that they retain like a small scale and are walkable businesses or are not, generating a lot of traffic. They shouldn't be a regional destination neighborhood commercial. They should be a convenience. They should support vitality and vibrancy and support an amenity-rich neighborhood. These images are from my neighborhood in Tacoma, where it's an existing single-family house. You can tell by the back and the pitch of the roof, and they kind of tacked on this 3-unit space of one of them, I think, was a plant store. One of them was at one point a barber, and another was a clothing shop. Well, these our neighborhood commercial is around corner stores, which could be any of those household items, like it could include fresh produce or groceries, as well as like cleaners or other amenities or things that you need for your house, as well as those corner stores could include ice cream parlors, or they could come out just straight for an eating and drinking establishment. We'll go through some of the provisions that we have included in the proposal for neighborhood commercial. So this was a good conversation with Planning Commission around when they should operate. If we have too limited of time, will kind of stunt the ability to survive. So we landed on having hours of operations from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Allowed a maximum size of 1,500 square feet for indoor and up to 1,000 square feet of outdoor area dedicated to the use. And however, there are provisions as well to accommodate the existing structure. So if you have an existing house or existing space that you want to convert or use for neighborhood commercial and it without any modifications, it's already larger than 1,500 square feet, the director can allow it to be used as neighborhood commercial. There's limitations to the size, so the category of vehicle and the timing of deliveries, so that to help mitigate any impacts to the neighborhood. As well as there's new design requirements for outdoor seating that actually would apply beyond just neighborhood commercial, but any kind of restaurant or use that wants to have this outdoor uh, seating. But this is really on the private property, not in the right of way. This is Title 19 is for private property. As well as another lengthy conversation was how do you deal with parking? Because parking can be really expensive for developers to provide, but also acknowledging that like there needs to be some level of accessibility. So we landed on requiring a maximum number of parking spaces and a minimum number of bicycle parking spaces. Um, the planning commission's recommendation, so we actually ended up extending our public hearing. We had a public hearing on April 30th and then extended it to March 20th and got a lot of public comments and a lot of feedback. As a result, after the public hearing, the planning commission discussed the proposal and by majority passed a motion recommending that the Burien City Council approve the housing code and zoning map amendments proposal with the following 4 amendments. Some that we've kind of already covered, but increasing the minimum lot size for R3 from 3,000 to 3,500 square feet, as well as increasing the front yard setback for R3 from 10 feet originally proposed to 15 feet. Also, the open space and recreation space calibration is how are we gonna like require that? So it ends up landing on a per bedroom basis instead of the unit type. And extended the hours of operation for neighborhood commercial, originally proposed from 8 AM to 8 PM, landed at 7 AM to 9 PM. I won't go through this timeline, but we've been working on this since the beginning of the year with planning commission and engaging with the public, attending the empty bowls event, as well as tabling at farmers markets, as well as meeting with neighborhoods to discuss the proposals. Um, this is a type 4 decision. Per the Burien Municipal Code, to approve this, we follow a type 4 process. And there are decision criteria in the Burien Municipal Code for being able to approve a type 4 application. And so there's 2 sets of criteria here. There's the type 4 application to amend the Burien Municipal Code, and then there's a type 4 application criteria for amending the official zoning map of the city. There are a handful of goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that are in your packet here in the staff report, demonstrating consistency or compliance with the comp plan to meet that first criteria, as well as bearing a substantial relation to public health, safety, and welfare. I think we heard that tonight too, is how housing is a public safety issue as there's a housing crisis, and being able to expand housing options and choice and making it easier to develop it will have an impact on meeting the current and future housing need in the community, as well as being in the best interest of the community as a whole. Like Liz has mentioned, this is not a mandate on what people have to do with their property. It's setting a bar, or in some ways, trying to remove the barriers. There's gonna be enough barriers to development, and we don't want our regulations to be them. So we're providing more flexibility and more options, and frankly, increasing the property rights of Burien property, current and future property owners, of what they can do if they do so desire. In addition, we've got this map amendment criteria. So it's consistent with the comp plan. That's because only R3 is implementing the residential land use 2 designation, and only R1 and R2 are implementing the residential low 1 designation, as well as the goals and policies in the comp plan. The rezone is also going to advance public health, safety, and welfare by expanding housing options. Our existing zoning doesn't do that. It's very limited in the typology and number of units and development feasibility by the limitations of existing lot sizes, as well as the rezone will not have a significant adverse environmental impact that are materially detrimental to adjacent properties or other affected areas. This is housing and neighborhood commercial. This is not hazardous waste plants or industrial zoning. This is places for people to live and recreate and grow a family if they so choose, or age in place. Staff recommends that, or staff has concluded that the housing code and zoning map amendments as drafted and enclosed in Exhibit A to the ordinance and proposed zoning map enclosed as Exhibit B to the ordinance are consistent with the decision criteria required for the adoption of zoning code amendments and a citywide rezone. Staff recommends that the city council approve the proposed housing code and zoning map amendments. The suggested motion is to move to place the ordinance number 868 on the business agenda at the June 30th, 2025 meeting, city council meeting for discussion and potential action.
I'm Leslie, just going to go through some very, very brief implementation and next steps. So June 30th of 2025 is the proposed action on the ordinance for the council to consider, and that will allow us to meet those requirements from the state. That is unfortunately our last day to meet the deadline that the state has for implementing this. That will also fulfill grant requirements for funding that the city has been promised from the State Department of Commerce as well. That is, once we finish that, then we get the funding. It unlocks money that we've already spent to some extent with our consultants in moving through this process. It also amends the Burien Municipal Code to provide Burien-specific regulations. In the event that we do not pass this by the end of the month, we would revert to the state regulations that are not super consistent, don't have some of the open space requirements. So that's what would happen. And then this also amends the official zoning map of the city, which again provides that consistency with the comprehensive plan that we are hoping to align those two after all this multiple years. I think you started the comprehensive plan in 2022. So this is one of those final pieces to implement. And now we're available for conversation and
Thank you.